Hi guys, welcome to another video. Have you ever searched on AliExpress for like CPU air coolers? Like maybe you're trying to build a very budget gaming system and you're trying to save some money, from you don't want to buy like the expensive CPU air coolers, and you're searching for AliExpress for something cheaper yet can do the job. So if you do, you will find that actually if you just type in CPU air cooler on AliExpress, there's a whole host of them. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, and different price points. There are some which are extremely cheap and some which are more premium, like over 100 Singapore dollars as well. So today I'm gonna be reviewing one of them. Which is this one. So this, let me just go into the face cam. This is the it is the Upsiren Walrus Assassin 90. 90 meaning the size of the fan is 90 millimeters. It is actually listed in some of the search results here. I believe you will see this one, Upsiren Walrus Assassin 90. And just like with my previous review, in the previous video I reviewed the Alseye M90. So just a quick update for those who watched the previous video. Right now the price for one of the Alseye M90 listings has actually dropped. So previously I said it was about like 80 or 100 Singapore dollars after shipping, but now one of them actually has already dropped. So, and it is offering free shipping. It's only about 40 Singapore dollars. So I think after GST, we should expect about 40 plus ish Singapore dollars. So actually it's not too bad. So that is one to consider. But moving on to today's review, this is the Upsiren Walrus Assassin 90. Some of the specs for this cooler is that it has 4 heat pipes, about 1000 to 2500 RPM, which is, I don't know how accurate Hardware Info's data is, but Hardware Info, I think the max fan speed on the software is about 2008 RPM, but it might not be super accurate. I think using a tachometer might be more accurate. CFM, it says here until 48 or around 49 CFM, and decibel in terms of loudness about 32. This one I don't have anything to measure it, but in my benchmark, in my experience, at max load is it's not that loud, so it is pretty soft. I think in the case you will barely hear it at all because I'm testing in the open air test bench. Okay, so as you can see, let's talk about this, how the physical aspect of the cooler. So you can see here it is a 4 heat pipe design. So there are 4 heat pipe. Just like the Alseye M90 is a little bit on the budget end. So for these budget coolers, they do not have any nickel plated cold plate, unlike the Thermalright, like Peerless Assassin or the Thermalright Phantom Spirit series. So heat pipes will go into this small heat sink. So the heat sink and the fins are actually pretty small. It is just this small chunk here, and you can see the fan is almost as thick as the heatsink. Fan wise, it is a little bit on the thicker end, which is it does help provide some amount of significant airflow. And the why I bought this in the first place was because there's this digital display where you can display the temperatures, but it does rely on their proprietary software, which you can see there are some issues later. Okay, I'll talk about it later. So let's see if there's some information about the fan. So these are the specifications of on the AliExpress webpage. Fan, well, does it state the thickness? Okay, fan is 92 by 92 millimeters, so technically a 90 millimeter fan, but it is by 25 millimeter in thickness, so it's 2.5 cm. Most normal fans, right, like normal case fans for like 120 millimeter case fans, typically they are about 20 millimeter in thickness, but this one is slightly thicker, about 25, and generally the thicker the fan, the larger the blades, and thicker fan and larger blades can provide a little bit more airflow and has higher probably higher what you call static pressure. I'm not super sure about that, but it makes sense as it has more space to suck in more air to push out the air through the back. So there's more static pressure in theory, from based on what I understand. And I think the Fantex T30 fans, they are really effective at providing airflow. That's because rather than a standard 20 millimeter for case fan, the Fantex T30 has a 30 millimeter in thickness case fans, which really helps to provide more airflow and more static pressure. So there is that. Yeah, so these are the specs. So all in all, this one is not too bad. And what we're gonna test it with is we're gonna benchmark it as usual on the 5900X platform, where that is the fastest or the highest core count CPU that I have. Even though it's on the AM4 platform, it is one of the fastest that I have. Let me adjust the camera a little bit, maybe like this. Yeah. Okay. So that's that. What else do I need to talk about? So we talked about fan RPM, we talked about the fan size, where to buy off AliExpress. What's the price like? So you can see here as listed, the price for one of these, like these are, if you type in Walrus Assassin 90 on AliExpress, there's many like quite a lot of listings of them, so they are in good supply. The cheapest I can find is probably this one, 22.91. So this one is free shipping as well. So probably if you include a buy now, after GST, it will probably be about 25-ish Singapore dollars. When I actually purchased this, let me check my the price that I paid for it. So when I purchased this, the price I paid for it in total was about 29.33 Singapore dollars after GST, and if there's any shipping, or I think, yeah, I say it's fast delivery. I'm not sure whether there's shipping charges, but overall I paid about 30 Singapore dollars. So overall it's not a bad fan, but how does it perform? Let's go to the results. Okay, so as per our Alseye Max M90 review, the results are all here. I'm comparing them against the stock. Oh, sorry, let me change my scene. I'm comparing them against the stock AMD Rave air cooler. Maybe let me bring up here, and you can see here. And maybe I will make myself a little bit smaller. These results a bit bigger. Okay, so we're comparing against the AMD Rave stock cooler, the Alseye Max M90, as well as the Thermalright Phantom Spirit Evo 120. And Cinebench results, as you can see, it is actually not too bad. Like in terms of comparison, Cinebench R23 10-minute result, 19.709, which means it is technically tied with the Alseye Max M90 as well as Thermalright Phantom Spirit Evo. This is basically because it didn't hit thermal throttling temperatures, because for the 5900X or the Ryzen 5900X on the AM4 platform, the thermal throttling temperature for it is 90 degrees Celsius. So, but you can see that temperatures are a little bit on the higher end. The average CPU temp during a 10-minute run of Cinebench R23 hit about 82.8 at the max, which is pretty similar to the Alseye Max M90. How about the max CPU temps? Max CPU temps was higher as well, 84.5. So also higher than the Alseye Max M90. And during then, the ambient temp was 30 degrees. So actually, it's a little bit less. This is the average change in CPU temps, which is the difference between the average CPU temp subtracted against the ambient temp. So you get the difference of 52.8. So the lower the difference, the better the CPU cooler, which means that the lower the average temperature against the ambient temps, because we have to take ambient temps into account. If you're watching this video and you're living in somewhere colder, maybe like United States or maybe Japan, for example, yeah, maybe so further up north where you might be having like maybe 15 degrees Celsius ambient room temperature. So obviously your results here will be 15 degrees Celsius lower. So how about clock speeds? On the 5900X, during a 10-minute run of Cinebench R23, the average clock speed was 4.0 gigahertz, which is technically lower than what the Thermalright Phantom Spirit Evo can do. And yeah, so it is not as high, didn't perform as well as the Thermalright Phantom Spirit Evo, which makes sense because the Phantom Spirit Evo 120 is a 7 heat pipe cooler, which has a lot more heatsink area. Max clock is 4.3, which is same as the Phantom Spirit as well as the Alseye Max M90. And somehow the average CPU power is a little bit higher at 136 watts and max CPU power at 139 watts. I'm not so sure why. It may be because of the software that's running in the background. So Okay, so let's talk about the software. So in terms of but before I talk about software, let's wrap up about performance. So in terms of performance, it is not that bad. Like you can see that it performs okay, and for such a small CPU cooler, there are some benefits in that it is pretty small, and having a digital display is quite nifty. So it's surprisingly capable for such a small CPU cooler. Like looking at this, I was not confident that it would be able to cool a 5900X, but seems like it's barely able to do so. However, if you're talking about like long workload, like maybe if you're using a 12 core CPU for longer workloads, like maybe rendering a video for like half an hour or several hours, then maybe you might hit thermal throttling temperature. If you're in a case that doesn't have good enough airflow, then maybe this is not sufficient enough. So I would say for 12 core CPUs, this might be the limit. I would recommend something better for if you are using a 12 core CPU intensively. But for 16 core CPU, I would advise against it. That means anything like the 5950X, 3950X, or any of the Intel CPUs that run a lot hotter with higher power consumption, I would advise against using this, because as you can see at 100 and about 30 watts, it is almost hitting the thermal limits of the CPU itself. So anything that consumes more power, 16 core CPUs from AMD, like 7950X and so on, I would advise against using this. And let's talk about the display and the software as well. So there, I will probably include some B-roll of how it looks like when it's running. You can see the display and so on. But it is not too bad. Like it functions. The problem is that for it to function, you have to use their proprietary software, which is this. So it looks like this when you're using it in the desktop. But this software actually is being flagged as malware when I first activated it. Like a Windows Defender actually tries to block it. And I believe I installed one of the versions and Windows Defender identifies it as a Trojan. So yeah, it's not super reliable. But how do we get the software in the first place? It took me a while to try and get it. You have to actually Google for Upsiren Walrus Assassin IT. So when you Google for it, you can see that there's this Chinese webpage, accessories Upsiren. So it's a Upsiren like international homepage, so on and so on. And then if you go to the download section on the top right, let me move myself out of the way. Yep. So download section on top right, you can see that you have this. So yeah, the pop-up doesn't really work that well. And then there's Walrus, Walrus Assassin, so a few of their products. So basically you have to download this software and you have to install it. But yeah, take note that there is a malware warning so when you install it. So display is nice, but without the software, the display doesn't work. And the software is technically possibly malware. I mean, if I were to try and defend it, technically any like temperature reading software that has to get access to somewhere lower levels of your CPU function, of your motherboard function, is technically maybe a Trojan. But then again, HW info doesn't identify as a Trojan, and it can like display so much info. And yeah, so this Chinese softwares, I'm not too sure. But I wouldn't be safe. I wouldn't sleep soundly by installing this. Like in order to get this software to actually work, right? Windows Defender technically blocks it because it identifies it as a threat. So for this software to actually work and read my CPU temps, I had to provide an exclusion in Windows Defender. So that means I force Windows Defender to not scan and to not block it, which means that you're technically running malware run rampant on your system. So that is not good. Yeah, you can tell by how long of a rant this is that I'm really not very comfortable recommending the software, because it clearly identifies as a malware, but I don't know whether it's doing anything actually malicious. Okay, so there is that. So that's it for this review. I would say this cooler is nice. It's okay. I would say this Upsiren Walrus Assassin 90 is nice. The display is nice, but the software is horrendous. It identifies as a malware. So even though the cooler is sufficient, if you are running a budget system, for example, if you have like a 3600X, something like a 6-core CPU 5600X, and you're running something, you want a very budget cooler, I think this will work. But if you want the temperature display to work, then you have to technically install malware on your system, which I would never recommend. So yeah, that's that for this review. So take it as it may. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Price wise is pretty good though, but then again, there are actually other competing coolers that are of similar price. But in terms of the aesthetics for the price, I would say it is pretty good. There is also a Thermalright digital assassin, which is something similar to this in the market, in the local market. I think that one costs more expensive. I think it's about at least 40 or 45 Singapore dollars. I'm not too sure, and I don't have a copy. I don't have that cooler to technically review. So that is also one of the competing products you can consider if you're considering something with a digital display. So I would assume that any of the Upsiren, like the Upsiren 120 Walrus Assassins coolers, they all need the same software. So technically all of them, will have malware if you install it. Yeah, okay, I've ranted quite long enough. So that's it for this review. If you like more of these cooler reviews, I think I have one more to go. The other cooler that I have that I haven't reviewed, I think it's a Metal Fish cooler, one of the cheap CPU air coolers. I don't technically see it here, but it's one of them. So I will do a review and then I upload it in due time. Okay, we'll see you guys in the next one.